The Galactic Council, an assembly of the most advanced alien civilizations, once saw humanity as nothing more than a violent, unpredictable species. We were denied entry, labeled as a danger to galactic peace, and cast out like a rabid animal. At first, humanity protested. We tried diplomacy. We sent ambassadors, scientists, and leaders to plead our case. We had earned our place among the stars, we argued. But the Council would not listen. They saw our wars, our history of conflict, and our ruthless adaptability, and they decided the galaxy was safer without us, so they banned us. They forbade trade with human colonies. They exiled our fleets from neutral space. They ensured that no species would share technology with us. They believed they had condemned us to isolation and slow extinction. But they had underestimated us. In the darkest corners of space, humanity did what it had always done best. We survived. Cut off from the comforts of intergalactic civilization, we built our own empire. We adapted. We innovated. We reverse-engineered alien technology, improved it, and then surpassed it. The exiled colonies forged an armada, each world dedicated to one purpose: vengeance. By the time the Galactic Council realized their mistake, it was too late. The first human dreadnoughts arrived in the Zixian cluster, a region long thought impenetrable. Their defenses crumbled within hours. Council forces, used to fighting in neat formations, were unprepared for human warfare. Unpredictable, brutal, and devastating. One by one, their member races fell. And now, as our fleet surrounds the Council's homeworld, their leaders, who once dismissed us as savages, tremble before the empire they tried to destroy. Their last transmission was a desperate plea. We were wrong. Humanity, please, have mercy. But mercy is for those who deserve it. The Galactic Council chamber, once a symbol of unshakable power, now reeked of fear. Holographic displays flickered with images of burning worlds, shattered fleets, and the unstoppable advance of the human war machine. The once mighty civilizations that had ruled the stars for millennia were now scrambling for survival. High Chancellor Vorkhan, a towering reptilian from the Drak-Zul Dominion, slammed his claws against the council table. "How did this happen?" he roared, his voice trembling with barely contained panic. "We exiled them. We cut off their resources. They should have perished." A soft, slithering voice answered him. "And yet, here they are," murmured the Silari envoy, her crystalline eyes dim with despair. "More powerful than any of us imagined. More vengeful." They had underestimated humanity's tenacity, their sheer stubborn refusal to die quietly. Decades ago, when the Council had deemed humanity unfit for the galactic community, they had believed they were making the right choice. Humans were violent, reckless, warlike, a species that had torn itself apart countless times. The Council feared that if humanity were allowed to spread unchecked, they would bring ruin to the fragile peace of the galaxy. So they exiled them. Humanity had pleaded, begged for a chance, but their pleas had fallen on deaf ears. Now their silence was filled with the roar of their war engines. The destruction of the Zixian cluster had been the first sign. The humans had stormed through it, annihilating defenses that had stood for centuries. Then came the fall of the Vishari trade conglomerate. Worlds burned, cities reduced to rubble, entire fleets torn apart. Reports described human soldiers moving with ruthless efficiency, their technology surpassing anything the Council had anticipated. Now, the humans were here, at the doorstep of the Council's homeworld. A shiver ran through the chamber as the planetary defense grid detected their arrival. The great warships of the United Terran Dominion filled the void, their dark metal hulls absorbing the light of the twin suns. They bore no insignias, no markings, just the cold, merciless advance of an empire that had not forgotten. The Council's last hope, the Grand Armada, had been destroyed at the Battle of Vestris Prime. The footage had been horrifying. Thousands of ships obliterated in coordinated strikes, human AI-guided weapons cutting through their formations with surgical precision. A desperate message was sent to the human flagship. "We were wrong. Humanity, please, have mercy." The reply came moments later, in a voice that sent a chill through every being in the chamber. "Mercy?" The voice, deep and cold, belonged to Grand Admiral Kael Draven, Supreme Commander of the Terran Dominion. "Did you show us mercy when you left us to die in the void? Did you offer kindness when you exiled our children, starving and alone? Did you hesitate when you stripped us of our future?" Silence. Then, the final words before the invasion began. "We have not forgotten. We have not forgiven." The comms cut off. Moments later, the bombardment began. The first strikes were precise, surgical. Humanity had long since mastered the art of war, and they had no intention of wasting resources on a prolonged siege. Orbital rail cannons fired tungsten rods at near-light speeds, bypassing energy shields and slamming into the planetary defenses with devastating force. Plasma bombardments followed, vaporizing defensive turrets and shield generators in blinding bursts of fire and molten steel. On the surface, the once proud Council cities, bastions of civilization for millennia, erupted into chaos. Civilians scrambled for shelter, the planetary defense forces struggling to mount any form of resistance. But they were unprepared. The Council had fought wars before, against pirates, against insurgents, against rival empires, but they had never fought humans. The first wave of dropships descended through the burning sky, their armored hulls shrugging off the scattered anti-air fire. The moment they landed, the hatches burst open, and human soldiers poured out in disciplined formations. These were not the desperate survivors the Council had abandoned decades ago. These were the elite warriors of the United Terran Dominion. Exosuits hummed with kinetic shielding, their alloyed plating nearly impervious to conventional weaponry. Their rifles, sleek and compact, fired magnetically accelerated projectiles capable of shredding through even the toughest alien armor. They moved with the precision of a species that had been fighting wars since before they even left their homeworld. Resistance was swift but futile. Council forces, composed of multiple alien species, attempted to hold the defensive lines. The Drak'Zul warriors, massive reptilian brutes, charged into melee, expecting to overwhelm the human infantry with brute force. But humanity had mastered close combat long ago. Power-augmented gauntlets met claws and fangs. Blades of pure energy clashed against reinforced combat knives. The Drak'Zul, creatures that had once been feared for their unmatched strength, found themselves outmatched by the sheer ruthlessness of human soldiers. Solari battlecasters, their crystalline bodies shimmering with psychic energy, tried to strike back with mental attacks, overloading human minds with waves of pain and confusion. It had worked against other species before. But against humans? The Solari learned too late that human minds were different. A lifetime of struggle, war, and hardship had forged humanity into something terrifying. Their willpower, their sheer refusal to break, made them resistant to the psychic assaults. Worse, the Dominion had studied psionics in secret, developing countermeasures that turned the Solari's own abilities against them. Within hours, the outer defenses of the Council's capital were gone. The once glorious High Spire, the heart of the Galactic Council, now stood exposed. Smoke and flames rose into the atmosphere, a stark contrast to the pristine, towering structure that had once symbolized the unity of the galaxy. The council leaders had fled to the deepest sanctum of the spire, surrounded by their most elite guards, but they knew it was only a matter of time. And then, the doors to their chamber exploded inward. Through the smoke and fire, a lone figure stepped forward, clad in sleek, black armor adorned with the insignia of the United Terran Dominion. His face was partially scarred, a testament to the wars he had fought and survived. His cold, gray eyes scanned the chamber, settling on the cowering council members. Grand Admiral Kale Draven had arrived. Behind him, his elite soldiers spread out, their weapons trained on the trembling alien leaders. Silence filled the room. Draven took a slow, deliberate step forward, his boots echoing in the vast chamber. He let the silence linger, let them feel the weight of their impending doom. Finally, he spoke. "You thought you could bury us, that we would fade away. You were wrong." The council members shuddered, their desperation palpable. One of them, a Solari elder, fell to her knees, her crystalline body dimming. "Please," she whispered, "spare us. We surrender." Draven tilted his head slightly, considering her words. Then a cold smile formed on his lips. "Surrender?" He gestured toward his soldiers. "You exiled us to the void, left us to die, but we did not die. We thrived. We built an empire greater than yours, and now you will see what happens when humanity is denied." With a flick of his wrist, his soldiers opened fire. The Galactic Council, once the rulers of the stars, died in a hail of human gunfire. Draven turned, stepping away from the carnage, his voice echoing through the burning chamber. "Welcome to the age of humanity. The Galactic Council was dead. Their blood stained the once pristine floors of the high spire, their bodies crumpled in a heap of failure and regret. The rulers of the stars, the ones who had banished humanity, had met their end at the hands of those they had sought to erase. Grand Admiral Kyle Draven stood among the fallen, his expression unreadable. Around him, his soldiers moved with mechanical precision, securing the chamber, ensuring that no one remained alive to challenge their victory. The Dominion had come, and they had conquered. But this was only the beginning. Draven turned to his second-in-command, a hardened warrior named Commander Adrienne Hale. Her battle-worn armor was still smoking from the fight, and her piercing blue eyes scanned the room with clinical efficiency. "It's done," she said, her voice laced with satisfaction. Draven nodded. "Send the transmission." Hale didn't hesitate. She activated her wrist console, linking directly to the Dominion's command network. Within seconds, the message was sent across every channel, every remaining stronghold of the former Galactic Council. The words would haunt the galaxy forever. The Council is no more. The Dominion rises. Across the stars, the news spread like wildfire. Races that had once bowed to the Council's authority now faced an uncertain future. Some celebrated, having long despised the corruption of the ruling elite. Others trembled in fear, knowing that humanity's wrath had only just begun. Draven turned his gaze toward the shattered window of the spire, overlooking the ruined capital city. Smoke billowed into the atmosphere, fires still raging where Dominion forces had struck. The streets below were littered with the remnants of failed resistance, alien soldiers who had died trying to defend a dying empire. He exhaled slowly. This was the justice humanity had waited for. But vengeance was not enough. "Status on the Council's fleet?" he asked. Hale checked her datapad. "What's left of them is scattered. Some tried to flee to the outer colonies, but our interceptors are already hunting them down. The largest group is holding out in the Farsid Nebula, hoping to regroup." Draven's lips curled in a smirk. Hope is a dangerous thing to have when facing humanity. He turned to the holomap projected before him, studying the last remaining territories still clinging to the remnants of the old order. Their empire is in ruins, he murmured. But we won't stop here. Hale raised an eyebrow. You're thinking about full annexation. Draven met her gaze. They never gave us a home among the stars, so we took one for ourselves. Now, we take everything. A quiet tension filled the air as the full weight of his words settled on those present. The Dominion had already proven its strength, but conquest was only part of the equation. Now, they had to build something greater. Draven turned to his officers. Inform all Dominion fleets, every council world, every stronghold, every last remnant of their empire will submit or burn. The order was given. Across the galaxy, Dominion warships moved with terrifying speed, sweeping through the remains of the old order like a firestorm. Once mighty civilizations fell one by one, their leaders surrendering before the might of humanity. Some chose to resist, believing they could stand against the new rulers of the stars. None succeeded. The Solari homeworld, once a sanctuary of peace and enlightenment, now bore the banner of the Dominion. The Drakzul strongholds, legendary for their warriors, lay in ruins, their rulers executed for their defiance. Even the Vashari, the wealthiest trade lords in the galaxy, found themselves kneeling before humanity, their riches now fueling the war machine that had dismantled their empire. Within months, what was once the Galactic Council's domain became the United Terran Dominion. No longer exiles, no longer outcasts. Humanity was the law now. On the bridge of his flagship, Retribution, Grand Admiral Draven stared at the star map, watching as the last pockets of resistance faded. Hale approached, arms crossed. It's done. The galaxy belongs to us. Draven nodded, but his expression remained unreadable. For now. She studied him for a moment. You don't sound satisfied. He exhaled. I should be. We won. But victory isn't the end. It's just the beginning. Hale smirked. Then what's next? Draven turned away from the star map and looked out at the endless void. There are other galaxies. And the conquest would never stop. The United Terran Dominion had crushed the Galactic Council, reshaped the political order of the known universe, and stamped humanity's name onto the stars. But the war was far from over. Victory, Draven knew, was not an end. It was a transition. Conquest was easy. Ruling was harder. The Dominion's fleets now patrolled once hostile territories, enforcing humanity's rule over species that had once scorned them. New governors were installed, resistance leaders executed, and planetary economies were reshaped to fuel the growing empire. Yet, despite the overwhelming force the Dominion wielded, whispers of rebellion spread like a virus. It started in the outer colonies, small uprisings that were quickly crushed by Dominion shock troops. But then, the resistance adapted. They used guerrilla tactics, sabotage, and precision strikes against critical supply lines. The rebels knew they could never match the Dominion in direct combat, but they didn't need to. All they had to do was bleed the new empire, little by little. And someone was organizing them. Draven stood aboard the Retribution, gazing at the latest reports. The rebellion had started as a nuisance, but now entire sectors were on the verge of open war. They call themselves the Remnant, Hale said, standing beside him. Former council officers, deserters from our ranks, and a lot of angry civilians who think they can bring back the old order. Draven's jaw tightened. We burned the old order. They should know better. They don't care, Hale replied. They've turned you into the villain, the exiled warrior who came back to crush the free galaxy. Draven let out a dry chuckle. They would rather believe in a failed system than accept a stronger one. That's their weakness. Hale leaned against the command table. We need to make an example of them. Show the galaxy that resistance is pointless. Draven's eyes darkened. I already have a plan. The remnant had gathered in the Varanos system, deep within the nebula that once served as the Council's secret emergency retreat. There, they thought they were safe. They had outdated Council warships, skilled officers, and enough firepower to challenge the Dominion. But they had made one fatal mistake. They thought they were fighting the same humanity the Council had exiled decades ago. They weren't. The Dominion fleet arrived in overwhelming force, cutting off all escape routes. The moment the remnant realized they had been trapped, it was already too late. Draven led the assault personally. The Dominion's warships struck with terrifying precision, deploying cyber warfare tactics that shut down the rebels' defenses before they even had a chance to fire. What followed was not a battle. It was a slaughter. The rebel fleet, outnumbered and outmatched, was obliterated in a matter of hours. Then came the ground invasion. Dominion soldiers landed in force, sweeping through the remnant's last stronghold with ruthless efficiency. The resistance fighters fought bitterly, but they were facing an enemy that had mastered war. The battle ended with their leaders executed in the public square, their rebellion crushed before it could spread further. Draven stood among the burning ruins of the remnant's headquarters, watching as his soldiers secured the last prisoners. Some would be sent to labor camps, others would be executed. Hale approached him, wiping blood from her gauntlet. Message received, loud and clear, she said. Draven nodded. But this won't be the last time. There will always be those who resist. She smirked. Then we keep reminding them who rules the galaxy. Draven turned to the skies, watching the Dominion fleet hover like silent gods above the conquered world. The rebellion was crushed, but something still nagged at him. The remnant had been well-funded. Too well-funded. Which meant someone else was pulling the strings. Someone out there wasn't just resisting. They were preparing for something bigger. And Draven intended to find out who. The Dominion had crushed the remnant. Their fleet was scattered, their leaders executed, and their dream of restoring the old order reduced to ashes. Across the galaxy, planets bowed before humanity's rule, their populations too fearful to resist. And yet, something felt wrong. Grand Admiral Kyle Draven stood alone in his private quarters aboard the Retribution, staring at the star map flickering before him. His instincts, honed by decades of war, told him this wasn't over. The remnant had been too well supplied, too well coordinated. Someone had been feeding them resources, weapons, and intelligence. Someone powerful. His thoughts were interrupted by the soft chime of his private comm channel. Only one person had access to this frequency. Draven activated the link, and Commander Adrian Hale's face appeared on the holographic display. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a tension in her eyes that immediately put him on edge. "We have a problem," she said. Draven narrowed his eyes. "Report." Hale took a breath. "One of our patrol fleets went dark in the Outer Rim. The Vindicator, the Aegis, and 4 escort frigates." Draven frowned. "Pirates?" This wasn't a random attack. Hale tapped a control panel, sending a data feed to his console. "We intercepted a distress signal just before the ships vanished. You need to see this." Draven played the recording. Static. Then a voice, distorted and broken, gasping through the interference. "They came from nowhere. Systems shutting down. Engines offline. It's them. Oh God, we were wrong." A scream, a burst of static, then silence. Draven felt a chill run down his spine. For years, the Dominion had believed they were the apex predators of the galaxy. No species could rival them. No force could stand against them. But this was something different. Hale's voice was grim. The fleet didn't just get destroyed. It vanished. No wreckage, no escape pods, just gone. Draven clenched his jaw. Who did this? Hale hesitated. We don't know. But whatever it was, our ships never even had a chance to fight back. Draven's mind raced. The Council was dead. The Remnant was crushed. There should have been no one left capable of mounting an attack of this scale. Unless... An old rumor surfaced in his mind. A whisper from the past. Something the Council had feared but had never dared to speak of openly. A shadow in the void. A civilization older than the Council itself. A force that had watched from the darkness, waiting. Draven exhaled slowly. Prepare the fleet. We're going to find out who thinks they can challenge the Dominion. Hale nodded. Where do we start? He turned back to the map, his eyes settling on a region of space that had been deemed forbidden even by the old Council. A place the ancients had called the Veil of Silence. He tapped the coordinates. We start here. And deep in the void, something watched, something old, something hungry. The Veil of Silence had been a mystery for centuries. Even during the height of the Galactic Council's rule, no ships had dared to venture inside. The few that had tried never returned. Officially, it was labeled as a dead sector, an empty stretch of void where no planets, stars, or stations existed. But the Council's records hinted at something far more sinister. There were old reports, redacted and buried deep in classified archives, of entire fleets disappearing near its borders. Now, it was humanity's turn to uncover the truth. Grand Admiral Cale Draven stood on the command deck of the Retribution, staring at the swirling mass of darkness on the holomap. No light escaped the veil. No signals emerged. It was a place untouched by time. And whatever had destroyed his missing fleet had come from inside. Jump complete, a navigator reported. We're approaching the edge of the veil. The Retribution and its escort fleet dropped out of FTL, emerging at the threshold of the unknown. The veil stretched before them like a vast, impenetrable wall of blackness. Sensors struggled to make sense of it, scanning and rescanning, only to return with conflicting data. Commander Adrian Hale studied the readings, frowning. This isn't natural, she muttered. It's like something is eating the signals before they can bounce back. Draven watched in silence. He could feel something out there. An ancient instinct, buried deep in humanity's primal mind, whispered a warning. Something was watching them. Launch probes, he ordered. Full spectrum scan. The drones shot forward, vanishing into the darkness. Seconds passed. Then minutes, no response. Draven exhaled sharply. Keep the fleet in formation. No one moves ahead of the flagship. A tense silence fell over the bridge as they drifted closer. Then, the lights flickered. The hum of the ship's systems wavered, as if something had touched them. A warning klaxon blared. Energy spike detected, Hale cursed. Where? The holomap flickered and shifted. Something was moving in the veil. Not a single signal. Not one enemy ship. But thousands. A vast, unseen force hidden in the void, shifting as if waking from slumber. And then, for the first time in recorded history, a transmission emerged from the veil. A voice, cold, hollow, ancient. We remember you. The bridge went deathly silent. Draven's blood ran cold. Who are you? He demanded. The voice came again. We remember you, flesh-born. We remember your kind. A deep, rumbling sound echoed through the comms, like the grinding of stone against metal. A sound that could have been a laugh or a threat. We remember when you were dust beneath our feet. Draven clenched his fists. Enough riddles. Identify yourselves. The lights dimmed again. The ship shuddered. And then, for a brief moment, the darkness lifted. On the holoscreens, the fleet saw them. Colossal, ancient warships, unlike anything in Dominion records. Their hulls were black as the void itself, shifting and pulsing as if alive. Symbols older than any known language glowed with eerie, alien energy. And at the center of it all, a massive structure loomed. An obsidian fortress floating in the abyss, large enough to dwarf any Dominion dreadnought. It had no visible engines, no apparent weapons, and yet it radiated an undeniable, crushing sense of power. The voice returned, deeper this time. "We were here before your empires, before your wars, before your kind crawled from the mud." A pause. "You exiled us? You thought we were gone?" The bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances. Draven narrowed his eyes. "The Council exiled us?" The voice rumbled with what could only be amusement. The Council were children, pretending to rule a galaxy they did not understand. A cold realization settled over Draven. The Dominion had thought they had conquered the galaxy, that they were the pinnacle of power. But now, standing before the veil, he understood the truth. Humanity was not the first to be exiled, and they were not the first to return. The voice spoke one last time. "Welcome back to the game." And then the attack began. The first strike was instantaneous. One moment, the Retribution and its fleet hovered at the edge of the veil, engines burning steady, weapons primed. The next, half of their escort ships vanished. Not destroyed, not shattered into wreckage, simply gone. The bridge exploded into chaos. Warning sirens screamed. Crew members shouted over one another, scrambling for answers. Draven remained still, watching the holoscreens as the Aegis, the Vindicator, and 3 frigates blinked out of existence. 1 second, they were there. The next, nothing. No explosions, no wreckage, not even a heat signature. Hale's voice cut through the panic. "What the hell just happened?" "Unknown weapon system," a lieutenant stammered. "Our sensors didn't even register an attack." Draven's eyes snapped to the holomap. The black, shifting shapes in the veil were moving now, encircling them. The Dominion fleet, once an unstoppable juggernaut, was now trapped. "We were here before your kind," the ancient voice echoed through the ship again, cold and mocking. "We watched you rise. We will watch you fall." Draven had heard enough. "Fire everything," he ordered. The Retribution's rail cannons roared to life. The Dominion fleet unleashed a full barrage, titanic plasma bolts, magnetically accelerated slugs, and missile swarms. The weapons streaked toward the enemy like vengeful gods of war, lighting up the darkness with fire and fury. And then, nothing. The moment the attacks hit the enemy ships, they were swallowed by the void. No explosions, no impact, as if the weapons had simply ceased to exist. Hale swore. "They're phasing through reality," she muttered. "It's like they're out of sync with—" A second attack came. Another 3 ships disappeared. Draven didn't flinch. He had expected this. "Signal the fleet," he said, voice cold as steel. "Full retreat! Get us out of here now!" The navigation officer's hands flew across the console. "Attempting FTL jump!" The ship shuddered violently. The lights flickered. The sound of groaning metal filled the air. "Jump failed," the officer gasped. "Something's blocking us." Draven clenched his fists. They had walked into a trap. A perfect trap. The Dominion had conquered the known galaxy, crushed every enemy in their path. And now, for the first time, they had encountered something beyond their understanding. Something that saw them not as conquerors, but as insects. Hale turned to Draven, eyes filled with something he had never seen in her before. Fear. "What do we do?" she asked. Draven didn't hesitate. "We break their trap." He activated the fleet-wide comms. "All ships, Full power to engines. Ramming speed. A stunned silence filled the bridge. Hale's mouth opened slightly. You're insane. Draven's expression remained unreadable. They're treating us like a puzzle to be solved, like prey. We're going to remind them who we are. A slow, cold smile formed on Hale's lips. She understood. Dominion ships weren't just designed for war, they were designed for brutality. Humanity had mastered the art of battle through sheer necessity, because for centuries, every other species had underestimated them. It was time to teach that lesson again. All ships, Draven repeated. Charge straight through them. No evasive maneuvers, no hesitation. If they want to test us, let's show them what happens. The orders were given. The Dominion fleet surged forward, burning at maximum thrust. The massive warships ignored the enemy's illusions, ignored their impossible tricks, and simply charged. The alien ships reacted, shifting, twisting, attempting to reposition. But they had miscalculated. They weren't facing another civilization bound by logic and diplomacy. They were facing humans, and humans were willing to break every rule to win. The Retribution smashed through the first enemy ship like a hammer against glass. The Dominion dreadnought's reinforced hull barely even took damage as it plowed straight through, sending the alien vessel spiraling into the abyss. The rest of the fleet followed suit. What should have been a massacre, what was a massacre, had turned into something else, something the enemy hadn't expected. A brawl. And humans? Humans thrived in brawls. The once impossible, untouchable enemy now struggled. They had relied on their tricks for too long. They had expected fear. They had expected confusion. They had not expected raw, unrelenting violence. Within minutes, the Dominion fleet broke through the veil, leaving fire and wreckage in their wake. The moment they were free, the Retribution's FTL drive roared to life, and the fleet vanished into the void. Escape, but not victory. Draven stood on the bridge, breathing heavily, staring at the veil on the view screen as it shrank into the distance. They had survived. But now, they knew the truth. They were not alone. And the enemy they had just encountered, they had been playing. A final transmission crackled through the speakers, the last words of the unknown force that had nearly wiped them out. We remember you. A pause. And now you will remember us. Draven exhaled, his grip tightening around the command rail. This war, he murmured, just changed. And for the first time in history, humanity wasn't fighting for conquest. They were fighting to survive. The fleet had escaped, but the Dominion was forever changed. For the first time since humanity had seized control of the galaxy, they had been humbled. Their weapons had failed. Their ships had vanished like dust in the wind, and the enemy had let them go. Not because they were weak, because they weren't ready yet. Grand Admiral Cale Draven stood in the war room aboard the Retribution, staring at the silent holomap. The veil of silence loomed at the edges of known space, unchanged, undisturbed, hiding whatever horror lay within. They had not won. They had barely survived. Hale's voice cut through the tense quiet. We need to tell High Command. Draven didn't look at her. Tell them what? That the invincible Dominion fleet was slaughtered like cattle? That we ran? She exhaled sharply. They need to know what's out there. Draven turned, his cold gray eyes locking onto hers. You don't think they already do? Hale's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Draven tapped the holomap, zooming in on the classified sectors once controlled by the Council. The records were vague, filled with redactions and false reports, but now he saw the pattern. The Council hadn't just exiled humanity out of fear. They had done it to create a shield. We were never supposed to return, he muttered. They pushed us to the farthest edges of space, hoping we'd die off before we grew too strong. Hale's eyes widened. They knew about the veil. Draven nodded. And they used us as a distraction, a sacrifice to keep whatever's inside from coming out. A long silence settled over the room. Hale crossed her arms. If that's true, then we just tore the lid off the coffin. Draven exhaled slowly. And now the dead are waking up. The last transmission from the unknown enemy echoed in his mind. We remember you. It wasn't a warning. It was a promise. The United Terran Dominion High Command, Terra Prime. The Dominion's War Council sat in tense silence, as resident, true as the holoscreens flickered, displaying the classified footage from the Veil, the loss of the Vindicator, the eerie vanishing of the fleet, the impossible weapons, and finally, the sight of the things lurking beyond the darkness. Fleet Admiral Adrastos, the oldest and most ruthless of the Dominion's leaders, leaned forward, his face lined with age and experience. Are you telling me, he said slowly, that we are dealing with an enemy we can't kill? Draven, standing at the center of the chamber, met the man's gaze without hesitation. Not yet. A murmur rippled through the gathered officials. Some looked skeptical, others afraid. General Sato, Supreme Commander of the Dominion's ground forces, clenched his jaw. So, what's the plan? We wait for them to march on Terra? Draven shook his head. They won't attack immediately, not yet. They're watching us, studying us. Adrastos leaned back, his expression unreadable. Then we study them in return. Hale, standing beside Draven, spoke up. That won't be easy. Every sensor we sent into the Veil was erased from existence. Adrastos smirked. Then we send something they can't erase. Draven raised an eyebrow. Meaning? The Fleet Admiral tapped a command into his console. A new projection appeared in the air above them. A sleek, midnight black warship, unlike anything currently in use by the Dominion. Hale frowned. That's not a standard design. Adrastos' smirk widened. That's because it doesn't officially exist. Draven studied the ship. It was heavily armored, covered in reactive plating and equipped with prototype weapons. But the most important detail wasn't its offensive capabilities. It was its core. A singularity drive. A technology the Dominion had been developing in secret, one capable of allowing a ship to exist in multiple states at once. It was built not just to survive the known battlefield, but to adapt to the unknown. We call it the Nemesis Project, Adrastos said. It was designed for war with enemies we don't understand. A ghost ship, built to operate outside the limits of normal physics. Draven stared at the projection. A weapon designed for a war that hadn't yet come. Had High Command known this day would arrive? Take it, Adrastos said. Find out what these things are, and if possible, his smirk faded. Kill one. 1 week later, the Nemesis, humanity's most advanced warship, hovered at the edge of the Veil. Its sleek black hull seemed to drink in the light, as if it didn't fully exist in the same reality as the rest of the fleet. On the bridge, Draven stood at the command console, watching the abyss ahead. Hale sat beside him, checking the Singularity drive's status. Last chance to turn back. Draven exhaled. Not an option. With a single nod, he gave the order. The Nemesis surged forward, plunging into the veil of silence, and the darkness welcomed them. The enemy had been watching. Now, for the first time, humanity was watching back. The Nemesis slipped into the veil like a ghost, its midnight black hull vanishing into the swirling abyss. For a brief moment, there was nothing but silence. No alarms, no impact warnings, just a deafening absence of everything. Then, the ship's sensors struggled to adjust. The universe outside didn't behave like normal space. Light twisted unnaturally, shadows moved in ways they shouldn't, and time itself seemed wrong. On the bridge, Grand Admiral Cale Draven kept his gaze locked on the forward view screen, jaw clenched. The moment they crossed the threshold, he had felt something. A pressure, an awareness, as if the veil itself was alive. Hale's voice broke the quiet. Singularity drive is stable, shields holding at full capacity. She exhaled, tension evident in her voice. But the sensors, they're giving us impossible readings. Draven turned to the crew. Define impossible. The chief sensor officer, a young but sharp-minded woman named Lorna Skye, hesitated before answering. There are objects around us. Ships, structures, things that shouldn't be here. But they're not fully real. She swallowed. They keep phasing in and out, like ghosts. Hale muttered a curse. Phased reality distortion. Draven narrowed his eyes. Are they watching us? Skye hesitated. I don't think so. Draven turned to her sharply. Explain. Skye's fingers danced across her console, pulling up a visual feed. The images flickered, struggling against the interference, but what they revealed made the bridge go silent. The ships surrounding them were ancient, not just old, impossibly old. Some bore remnants of alien designs long thought extinct. Others were beyond classification, covered in runes and symbols predating any known language. But the most horrifying detail? They weren't intact. These ships weren't an armada, they were a graveyard. Thousands of derelicts drifting in the void, some torn apart, others frozen mid-explosion, as if something had ripped them out of time. Draven exhaled slowly. This isn't just a battlefield. Hale nodded grimly. It's a warning. Then, the lights flickered. A low hum vibrated through the ship, deep and unnatural, like a whisper inside their bones. Skye's face paled. Admiral, we're not alone. Draven turned back to the screen. Show me. The feed zoomed in, past the drifting wrecks, past the remnants of dead civilizations, until it locked onto something moving. A ship. No, not a ship. A being. It was unlike anything Draven had ever seen. Its form was massive, shifting, blacker than the void itself, yet edged with something wrong. Like a living shadow wrapped in technology beyond human understanding. And it was staring directly at them. The whispering hum grew louder. The ship's power flickered again. Then, you should not have come. The voice wasn't a transmission. It didn't come through their comms. It came from inside their minds. The crew recoiled. Hale gritted her teeth, clutching her head. Skye let out a small, terrified gasp. Draven? Draven just stared. He had faced warlords, council fleets, and rebellious insurgents. He had conquered empires. But this was different. This wasn't a war. This was something else, something older, something that had been waiting. Draven squared his shoulders, voice steady as steel. Who are you? The being didn't answer. It just moved. One moment, it was still. The next, it wasn't. It closed the distance instantly, its massive form now looming directly in front of the nemesis. The ship shuddered. Every screen flashed with unreadable symbols. A deep, unnatural cold filled the air, as if reality itself was bending around them, and then a second voice spoke. But this one was different. It wasn't a whisper. It was a command. Enough. The presence surrounding them paused. The whispers stopped, and from the darkness another form emerged, larger, stronger, and infinitely more terrifying. The first creature withdrew, slinking backward like a scolded predator. And the new arrival, the one that had silenced it, turned its attention toward humanity's lone warship. Draven stared at the being before them. and for the first time in his life, he felt small. The presence loomed over them like a god. Its form was partially mechanical, partially something else. Something beyond physics, beyond time. It studied them. And then, in perfect, flawless Terran English, it spoke. "So, you have returned." The bridge was silent. Draven inhaled. "You know us." The being's gaze never wavered. "We knew you before you knew yourselves." A pause. Then, "You were our greatest mistake." Draven clenched his fists. "Then why did you let us go? Why didn't you destroy us?" The being's voice was almost amused. "Because, little human, you have not yet fulfilled your purpose." Draven's pulse quickened. "And what is our purpose?" The being leaned closer. "To fight." A deep, rumbling sound, something between a whisper and a roar, filled the comms. "To kill." The lights flickered again. The cold deepened. "To prepare the galaxy. For what comes next." Draven's breath caught. Hale whispered, "They don't want to stop us." Draven exhaled slowly. "No," he muttered. "They want to use us." The being's expression never changed. "And now, Grand Admiral Cale Draven, you must decide." A pause. Then, "Will humanity kneel? Or will it burn?" The bridge of the Nemesis hung in a frozen silence, the weight of the being's words pressing down on every soul aboard. The air was thick with cold, the lights dim and flickering, as if the ship itself trembled before the entity that loomed beyond the view screen. Will humanity kneel, or will it burn? Grand Admiral Kyle Draven stood motionless, his gray eyes locked onto the godlike presence before them. Its form, part machine, part nightmare, seemed to pulse with an ancient, unfathomable power. It wasn't just a threat, it was a judgment. Hale's whisper lingered in the air, her realization sinking in. "They want to use us." Draven's mind raced. These beings, these architects of the void, hadn't attacked to destroy. They had tested, they had toyed, and now they offered a choice that wasn't a choice at all. Kneel and become their weapon. Burn and be erased. But Draven knew humanity. He knew their history, their defiance, their relentless will to claw their way out of every abyss they'd ever been thrown into. The Council had tried to bury them. The galaxy had scorned them. And now these ancient shadows thought they could bend them? Number. He straightened, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "We don't kneel." The being's gaze sharpened, its presence intensifying. The ship groaned under an invisible strain, the hull creaking as if squeezed by an unseen hand. "You choose fire, then," it rumbled, its tone carrying a hint of curiosity. Draven's lips curled into a faint, defiant smirk. "Number, we choose us." He turned to Hale, his voice steady. "Activate the singularity drive. Full overload." Hale's eyes widened, but she didn't hesitate. She understood. Her hands flew across the console, inputting the commands. "Overload in 30 seconds. It'll tear a hole in this reality and theirs." The crew snapped into action, no questions asked. They trusted him. They always had. The being tilted its head as if intrigued. "You would destroy yourselves to defy us?" Draven faced it, unflinching. "We're not here to die. We're here to fight. If you want us to prepare the galaxy, we'll do it our way, not as your pawns." The Nemesis hummed with power, the singularity drive glowing brighter, its energy destabilizing the fabric of the veil. The graveyard of ancient ships trembled, the wrecks vibrating as reality began to fracture. The being watched, silent for a moment. Then that deep, rumbling sound returned, a laugh, cold and eternal. "Very well, Fleshborn, you have chosen." The lights flared, the cold vanished, and the being, along with its shadowed kin, faded into the void, leaving nothing but the drifting husks of their past victims. The Nemesis shuddered as the singularity drive reached critical mass. A blinding flash erupted, and a tear ripped through the veil. A jagged wound of light and chaos. The ship lurched forward, propelled by the collapsing energy, and in an instant, they were free. The veil of silence collapsed behind them, its darkness imploding into a singularity of its own making. Whatever had been inside, those ancient watchers, their graveyard, their plans, was gone. For now. The Nemesis emerged in normal space, battered but intact, its crew breathing hard but alive. The stars of the Dominion glittered ahead, a reminder of what they'd fought for. Hale slumped back in her chair, exhaling. That was insane. Draven didn't respond immediately. He stared at the view screen, the weight of their survival settling in. Skye spoke up, her voice shaky but firm. "Sensors are clear, no sign of pursuit." Draven nodded slowly. "Good." He turned to the crew, his expression unreadable but resolute. "We're not done. Whatever they were preparing for, it's still coming, and we'll be ready." Hale smirked, exhaustion giving way to her usual fire. "So, what's the plan, Admiral?" Draven looked out at the stars, his mind already turning to the future. "We rebuild. We adapt. We weaponize everything we've learned." He paused, his voice hardening. "And when they come back, or whatever they were waiting for shows up, we'll be the ones they fear. The United Terran Dominion High Command, Terra Prime." Months later, the galaxy had changed. The veil was gone, its secrets buried in the collapse. But the Dominion hadn't rested. The Nemesis's data had sparked a revolution. New ships, new weapons, new defenses. The Singularity Drive, once a prototype, was now the backbone of a fleet designed to face the unknown. Draven stood before the War Council, the scars of the veil etched into his face and his resolve. Fleet Admiral Adrastos watched him, a rare glint of approval in his eyes. "They thought they could use us," Draven said, his voice carrying across the chamber. "They were wrong." General Sato leaned forward. "And if they return..." Draven's gaze was steel. "We'll be waiting." The council nodded in unison. The Dominion had been forged in exile, tempered in war, and now, humbled by the veil, it had evolved. Humanity wasn't just a conqueror anymore. It was a survivor. And in the endless void, where ancient shadows once watched, a new truth echoed. The galaxy wasn't theirs to rule. It was humanity's to defend. The being's final words lingered in Draven's mind as he stepped out into the night of Terra Prime, staring at the stars. To prepare the galaxy for what comes next. He clenched his fist. "Bring it on."